Today, Chaf Dalet Elul is my birthday, so I want to bless everyone to have a wonderful, sweet new year filled with growth and good news and miracles and wonders on all fronts. Yes. So it's actually a very interesting day to have a birthday this year because Slichas was last night, and it's such a special time. We went to the Rav. We went to be with Rav Yitzhak in Kfar Chabad, and it was beautiful. Of course, the davening was beautiful, and the dancing at the end was so special because in 770 they would dance for hours after Slichas, and it was one of those things I was missing in Eretz Yisrael, but they really got it together there in Kfar Chabad last night. Everyone was dancing. It was just beautiful, beautiful dancing, praying, sliching. Yes, so they say the Rebbe said there's certain things that are good to do on your birthday. It's good to have a little farbrengen with your good friends. Baruch Hashem, I was able to do that, and to learn one's new kapitel of Tehillim, and to make a hachlata, to give tzedakah twice. To make a hachlata, to make a resolution. And they say it's good to tell your friends what your resolution is, because then they could say, come on, are you keeping up with your resolution? So what I took on, it's a small thing. They say it's good to take on small things, but it was, there's an idea that every Rosh Chodesh, we should learn like a few lines of our chapter of Tehillim for that year, for this year. Like if it's 12 lines, just to learn one, and if it's more than that, to divide it up so that we can cover the commentaries, not just to know what the words mean, but over the year to do the commentaries on our chapter of Tehillim, doing it on Rosh Chodesh. So I've been wanting to do that for the last almost 50 years. And now it's never too late, and that's my hachlata. So I wanted to share that with you, my friends here. So, okay, Rosh Hashanah. There's an inyan that's connected with Rosh Hashanah called Binyan HaMalchus, building Malchus. That's what Kabbalah says is the whole inyan of Rosh Hashanah is building Malchus. And we've learned by Hashgacha Pratis, we spent a lot of time learning about Shiflus, which is the inner dimension of Malchus. Shiflus is like the lowering of the ego. So motivation, so Shiflus is the inner motivation of Malchus. Malchus is translated as kingdom, royalty. It's very interesting that Shiflus, which is humility, one of the ways of translating humility, the lowering of the ego, is the inner dimension of royalty. Now, isn't that interesting? It's the motivation, it's the experiential, and it's just like ahava, love, is the inner dimension of chesed, and yira, fear, is the inner dimension of gevura, so is shiflus the inner dimension of malchus. And malchus, as we know, for everyone, we've all seen the charts, malchus is on the bottom of that partsuf of all the spheros, and that was one of the things that the Tsar of Russia took offense at with the Alter Rebbe, that spheros chart. He felt that it wasn't right. How could Malchus be on the bottom? Shouldn't Malchus be somewhere up there? But that's the way it is. Okay, so rectified Malchus is motivated by Shiflus. So there's Hashem's Malchus, and there's Hashem Shiflus, the motivation to be king. The motivation to be king in a healthy way comes from Shiflus. We're going to develop this idea. What's going on? So David HaMelech is the one who, he says, I have Shiflus in my own eyes, like he was the king. So he's the one who demonstrates to us how Shiflus is the inner part of Malchus. Rosh Hashanah, the avoda of Rosh Hashanah is Binyan HaMalchus, building Malchus. So on the one hand, it's our work, it's our avoda, and the Arizal said Hashem is doing it. Hashem is rebuilding his Malchus. So We'll see how it's all going to come together. Malchus is an attribute in our soul, a person's will to reign, which means to step out of myself. Now, isn't that interesting? Misyaches, it's to relate to reality, to involve myself in reality, which means to give value to reality in order to reign over reality, or even our little corner, our little corner of reality. We have to step out of ourselves, step out of myself. Although reality is infinitely distant from Hashem, Hashem puts himself aside, and we follow. There's situations where we put ourselves aside, and Hashem devotes himself to a nation to tend to every need of his people. The inner motivation of Malchus is shiftless. So we want to, since we're building Malchus this Rosh Hashanah, we want to do our part. We're going to really develop this idea of shiftless and Malchus. Okay. As exposed to a narcissistic desire to expand my ego, which is like warped lowliness. It's like a false ego. So that the narcissistic desire to expand my ego is opposed to putting myself aside to rule justly, to rule with love, to rule with compassion. So it's putting myself aside. This is the shiftless. Remember, we spoke about in davening, putting the ego aside to focus on Hashem. That's hiskafia. Okay, so and Malchus also is connected with speech, because the king reigns by giving, he gives his orders. So Malchus is connected with speech to explain something. Sometimes it takes an effort to express ourselves, to explain. So speech is like a miniature kingship, Malchus, and our speech should be motivated by shiftless. I thought that was an interesting idea. Can you imagine if our speech was motivated by shiftless? We'd say a lot of well thought out and humble things. Okay. So Malchus, kingdom, has a concealed root in the crown, in Keser. Keser is on the very top, By explaining, we understand it better ourselves. If we're really explaining something to someone, that's when we get to really understand it. And shiftless reflects this emunah, the Keser that's in emunah, the faith that's there in the crown. And we learn the anatomy of the soul, like it's the highest. The Keser is the highest, and it comes down into Malchus. So Rosh Hashanah is a willingness to re-reign. We want to rebuild Hashem's will to reign over us, to recreate the world, to go for it. We've spoken about this idea in the past. Hashem's willingness to rebuild the world. We want him. We want to, and that's the whole thing of, the night of Rosh Hashanah. The old light of the last year leaves, its budget is over. And the Alter Rebbe spoke about it not too long in Tanya, speaking about the idea in Devorim that the eyes of Hashem are on the land from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. Why doesn't it just say continually? Because at the end of the year, the old light goes away and a new light comes back. And during that period, and then the shofar brings down the new light. And when it's Shabbos, like it is this year, it's the psukim from Tanakh that we say in Musaf, in the shofar, Malchios, Chrenos, etc., Shofrios. They all have 9 psukim. We'll talk about the 9 missing dimensions. Because Malchus, so right after, let's get down to this, what's going on. So Adam and Eve are created back to back. They're attached. So this has certain advantages. They each know where the other one is, and she can wash the milchik dishes while he washes the fleshig dishes. But there's a little flaw. The flaw is they can't actually turn around and look at each other. They're glued together back to back. So, and they could be held together by narcissistic needs. So then there's the Nasira. The Nasira is like the surgical decoupling of Adam and Chava before Rosh Hashanah. And then Malchus is reduced to a dot. For Zohar, for Zer Anpin, it's also a bit traumatic. The back is gone. Malchus is now a dot. And so rebuilding Malchus is what all of history is about. Malchus has to get its 9 dimensions back that it's missing. That's what happens on Rosh Hashanah, because it's really 9 sets of blows. Even in Elul, it kind of can look like 10, the 10 sets of blows that are blown. But it was, I think we spoke about this before, it's known that there was a trua in between 2 tekiyas, that's the right way to do it. The tekiya was known to be just a long, straight blowing. And so there was a debate among the sages about what is trua. So there's some sages felt it's like the sigh of an old woman, and other sages felt it's like the cry of a baby, And because they couldn't make up their mind who is right, that's why we do both. So the shvorim, the So I'm not so good at singing, but I can do great shofar imitations. Yes. So that's it. So the shvorim and the trua are both, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, but it's actually considered 9 separate blows. And on Rosh Hashanah, these are what rebuilds Malchus. That's what we're interested in doing, rebuilding Malchus, so that ultimately they're the same size and they're both getting energy individually directly from Hashem, and they're not being held together by narcissistic needs. And they could look at each other in the eye. Isn't that cool? Okay, so that's part of what we're doing on Rosh Hashanah, rebuilding Malchus, and again, getting Hashem interested in recreating the world. We want to look especially cute, or whatever it is, like that while we're sitting there waiting for the new light. Okay, we'll talk more about it. So Rosh Hashanah is Hashem's, we want to arouse Hashem's will to reign again. So to put oneself aside, to reach into reality, takes motivation. There's a lot of ruts of Eshuv, run and return. And once a year, it's reassessed. Hashem reassesses. Should I continue recreating reality? This is Rosh Hashanah. Hashem's attention, his will to be king, is reassessed. To rebuild Malchus is reigniting Hashem's will to put himself aside. Because to create the finite world, that there's the empty space, Hashem put himself aside to create the space to make a finite world. Although it's interesting how our finite world, it's still finite, but it seems to get bigger. If you ever follow like astronomy, and they show like here you are in the galaxy, the solar system, in the galaxy, and each year they find jillion more billions of light years how big the universe is as it's expanding. But that's still finite. Only Hashem is infinite. So yes, the expanse. So we want to. Hashem is reassessing his will to be king. We want to reignite Hashem's will to put himself aside. It's like a tzaddik, a true tzaddik is a true king, and he has to put himself aside to rule. So shiftless is putting oneself aside. Hashem is putting aside all his infinite potential. Make creation precious again. Now that's from Effie Ehrenberg. Make creation precious again. I think we can get our bumper stickers going. That Hashem should want to recreate the world. It's such an interesting idea. It's such an interesting way to be spending the first evening of Rosh Hashanah. Just, I guess by putting ourselves aside. Okay, well, let's see how it's going to go. Reignite Hashem's interest to focus on finite issues. So Hashem has a lot of infinite options, but to focus on recreating the world. Contraction, the tzimtzum, is what brought finitude. So it has to be rechosen. Hashem has to rechoose at each Rosh Hashanah to put an infinity aside. It's a big Hiddush. Infinity. Finitude needs to be reignited. We need to reignite Hashem's will to recreate the world. Binyan, this is Binyan Hamalchus. Hashem rebuilding his attention. Creation needs to reignite his interest to reign. Oh, that's a good sentence. Creation, and that's us, we're creatures. We need to reignite Hashem's interest to reign. It's such an interesting idea. That's why I guess it's being repeated. This is what we're doing, in case you were wondering. So, how does creation reignite Hashem's will? You might be asking yourself. The answer is accepting the yoke. Kabbalah's Ol Malchus Shemayim. Accepting the yoke of Malchus, of the kingdom of heaven. This motivates a willingness to reign. People putting themselves aside awakens an unconscious tendency to reign. So isn't that interesting? So we want to awaken Hashem's tendency to reign by putting ourselves aside. People putting themselves aside. Kabbalah's Ol Malchus Shemayim. It's not about me. So our side of the binyan, building Malchus, involves shiftless. Okay. So recreation through the year is from the initial motivation of Rosh Hashanah. As again, we said it runs out at the end of the year. And Hashem, we want Hashem to feel, maybe this is interesting. What's going on here? Maybe something interesting, exciting is going on here. And this motivates Hashem to recreate the world. It's really such an exciting idea. Okay. So, and then Reb Effie mentions the Rebbe, by smiling, spreads vitality for months. It's true. People saw a great smile on the Rebbe during Tishrei, and it could last them for months, for a whole year. Yes, so Rosh Hashanah, the last night, is the end of the budget from last year's light, and we need to reignite it, to renew it every year. Blowing the shofar reignites it. So, and again, it's talking about what's happening on Rosh Hashanah, the evening until the shofar is blown. And this year, because it's Shabbos, it's till we say those pasukim in Musaf. So it answers in Kabbalah that the chayas of creation dissipates at the end of the year. We need the new vitality on Rosh Hashanah, and it's considered like a dormita de zoh, like a sleeping moment in creation. So the world is still there. The world hasn't just started to disintegrate yet, but it's still there in this kind of shaky state. So there's an idea we've spoken about that the Rashbi spoke about the king. The Arizal painted a picture of the king. And the Baal Shem Tov brought the king back. Here he is, Rabbanu Shel Olam. So the avoda of Rosh Hashanah, again, our lowliness, our shiftless, our accepting the yoke of heaven, creates a vacuum that sucks in Hashem's attention and awakens his willingness to reign. Let's go over that. We spoke about how when we were learning about shiftless, that lowering the ego, this space that used to be filled with ego is now filled with Hashem's presence and joy. So he's saying now a slightly different twist to it, that our shiftless creates a vacuum that sucks in Hashem's attention and awakens his willingness to reign. So that's a really big, and we've been practicing shiftless now for a few years. So we Shemeretz Hashem, we're gonna do it. Okay, so let's see. There's a few more ideas here I wanted to share. So when we're feeling our divine soul feels constant emunah. In other words, the emunah that we have is our divine soul feels it all the time, but it's super conscious. We want to bring it into our consciousness, and it brings joy. And again, the more shiftless, the more joy. So the animal soul has an existential awareness of itself. The animal soul believes that we are here. The animal soul believes in my being and its being. It believes in it. And my shiftless comes from this. I feel it's an interesting idea that the shiftless comes really from our consciousness of our animal soul and maybe how much it tries to boss us around. So it can result in shiftless. Okay. The king shows up at the door. The Alter Rebbe speaks about that. The king is showing up at the door, and the peasant is very happy. The king shows up, and what if I'm in my pajamas? Why didn't you call? But the king shows up at the door. The king shows up at the door. Yes. Joy is dependent on shiftless. Again, that's a very interesting idea to be. We know that we spoke about that a chassid is defined as a ball of joy. So joy is dependent on shiftless. It's really such important information. And of course, we've mentioned many times that shiftless is not low self-esteem because that's just ego focus. Shiftless is an actual lowering of the ego to the solid place of where we belong, that we're not better than anybody else, as we spoke about in chapter 30 of Tanya. Okay. So if we understand our place, then we can be happy. It's a real bargain. It's a necessity to rejoice. And we're Jewish, rejoice, yes. And we're hosting Hashem. It's a beautiful idea that Hashem came to my house and we chatted. Keep it going for generations. Chassidus renews Matan Torah. Chassidus renews it, keeps it going. Now, here's an interesting line that I was thinking about. The king doesn't call before he visits, because then it would feed our ego. And I understand that because we've been blessed to have many special people in our house. And I can see like it can feed the ego. I have to admit it can happen. So the king doesn't, you can't call the king Hashem is coming, come to my house tomorrow. No, we can't because it's unexpected. So the Hashem showing up at our door, at our Dir B'Tachtonim, does not feed the ego. Shiftless enhances our joy of hosting Hashem, hosting our emunah in Hashem. I could feel I'm unworthy of hosting Hashem, but here he is. Here he is right in our house. Yes. So shiftless is fundamental to being happy. And it's so interesting that shiftless is the inner quality of Malchus, and Rosh Hashanah is building Malchus. Okay, so I want to see if there's a couple of other exciting ideas I wanted to share with you. So this, we're going back to this idea of Adam and Chava being created. In Kabbalah, it's called, they were created du partsufim, du meaning two. We might have run into that. And partsuf is a face. So there were two faces because, as we say, they were back to back, facing in different directions with two faces till that moment of separation. Okay, so the first person was a man and a woman together as one person. Now that's an interesting idea. And again, the value in the attachment is they don't have to worry that the other one is going to run away. They can feel very secure. They're glued together. You don't have to worry. They're just stuck together. But there is something special in their separating and then choosing out of their free will to come together. That does seem a lot more meaningful, right? When we're choosing to be together, being stuck with glue. It's because we spoke about it, we've spoken about the idea of these lifelike robots. Somebody told me they saw a movie where there's an inventor who made lifelike robots, women lifelike robots, and they would like wait for they would go to the gym all day and bring their husband their shoes when he came home and make his favorite dinner every night. Because the creator of the robot said, "What do you need your wife with her different opinions? Get a lifelike robot." But Hashem didn't want us to be lifelike. He didn't create us like this because he wants us to choose to be as individuals with the animal soul saying, yes, I believe I exist, and to choose to have a relationship with him out of our own free choice. And this is the season. This is really the season. Adam and Chava, which represents Zar Anpin, the masculine midos, and Malchus, the feminine. So to look at each other, they needed a dichotomy. They needed autonomy, individual autonomy. So the separation is the separation and then the reconciliation. And this is that they should be face to face, that we should rebuild Malchus. All of these things are happening. It's a very exciting time. Let's see. Okay. So what's going to be? So next Sunday is Rosh Hashanah. The following Sunday, we will have a class. It's the class before. We'll do something on Yom Kippur and maybe a little bit on Sukkot, because that'll be the last class. And the next 2 Sundays are Yontif. And then the next class after that will be the Sunday after Shabbos Bereshis. Did everyone get that? Well, we'll repeat it. Anyway, in 2 weeks, we're going to have a class. That'll be like the Sunday after Shabbos Tshuva, getting ready for Yom Kippur, and then we'll speak, and then that'll be the last class, right? So we'll probably throw in a little Yom Kippur, maybe a little Sukkot, and we spoke about the shofar blowing, that Teruah business. So I think I might have covered, Then I see that Y.Y. Jacobson he spoke a little bit of what it was like in 770 with the Rebbe, so maybe I'll say a few words. I mean, there was a lot of highlights. It was totally physically, you can't imagine how horrible. You can't imagine how crowded it was. Very few people have experienced such levels of crowds. There were sold seats, which were like on wooden benches that went up. There were really room for 2, but they would sell 3 seats on each of these wooden benches, and everyone would bring their whole family. So there could be really tucked into many people. And then the aisles were filled. Everything was filled. People were everywhere. It was so, and you couldn't really, even if you had a seat, you couldn't really sit down unless everyone else agreed to sit down. It was something really extra. The davening was really the most beautiful possible davening you can imagine. That's what made it worth it. That's why all the people were there. And the Rebbe would blow the shofar. And then for the Haftorah, the Rebbe would read both the Haftorah, and also on Yom Kippur, also the Rebbe would read Yonah. But on Rosh Hashanah, it's Chana, and it has Lenar Hazeh Hispalalti. Chana says, for this boy I prayed, and each chassid felt like like the Rebbe's speaking about me, like we're the people the Rebbe is praying for. So, and it was called the washing machine, where downstairs where the men were, because people didn't have their feet on the ground. So there was this constant, they were too squashed together to have their feet on the ground, to be this circular movement. But the davening it really was an experience. It was hard to believe. There's nothing quite like it. And Baruch Hashem, I'm very grateful to have had the authentic experience. The slichas, what was last night, people, shluchim who couldn't get away, right? Someone wrote no social distancing, right? It was the opposite of social distancing. It was social being squashed into one, closeness. Yes, so the slichas. So people would come like shluchim who couldn't leave for all of Yontiv. If they were within five, because it was at 1 a.m. So people 5 hours away would come, and the davening, of course, was beautiful with the Rebbe there. And my friends and I would get there like 2 hours early to get a good spot and learn the mimer that's in the front of the Hebrew Slichas book and get ready, And then the dancing would go on for hours, and the dancing really worked its way through Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, dancing, and then by the end, it was Simchas Torah, the dancing of just Harachaman, Hashem, who answers the poor should answer us. Hashem, who answers the brokenhearted, should answer us. And it's sung, you could see you can get every emotion tucked in there. It was also, as I said at the beginning, very beautiful last night with Rabbi Ginsburg. And we want him to have a refuah shalema. So this class is dedicated for refuah shalema of Rabbi Yitzchak Feivish ben Braina Malka. And let me look at the chats for 1 second. Oh, very nice. Lovely. Thank you all. Thank everyone for their kind wishes. And let me get that chat back. And let's take that get well picture for the Rav. So if people can put on their get well smiles, don't be shy. I love seeing the people also. It's nice for me. Ben and Alesha. Come on, Chaya. Oh, here's people are appearing. It's Menucha Rachel. You're right. Our rabbi should be healthy and well for many long years and teach us much more and more of the inner Torah. Well said, Bracha. Thank you. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Great. So it's wonderful seeing everybody. I'm so glad we had this chance to bring together. So I want to wish everyone a good year, a sweet year. We should all be written and sealed for the best year so far, with Geula Shalema and everyone having what they need and want and love, and we should celebrate together. L'chaim, l'chaim. Yes, wonderful, wonderful seeing everybody. Really, I really appreciate our getting together. So in 2 weeks, Amir Hashem. Wonderful. Oh, a few more love messages. Wonderful. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Shalom, shalom.